Alright, how's everybody doing today? This is Mr. Muscarella coming at you. We're going to be taking a look at solving quadratic equations. And today we're going to take a look at only one of these four possibilities, because there's four different ways to solve quadratics that we'll take a look at throughout this chapter. The first one is going to be factoring, and in our textbook this actually is in sections 4.3 and section 4.4. The idea is the same behind both of them. Now, a second way, finding square roots, we'll deal with later, as well as completing the square and using the quadratic formula. All of these will get you the same thing. Now, one of the things about solving quadratic equations, the very first thing, you want your quadratic equation, make sure that it's set equal to 0. If it's not set equal to 0, you're going to have to move some things around and do that so that it is set equal to 0. So that's one of the main key things with that. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at example number 1. So we're going to take a look at solving quadratic equations, and ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, but our a value is going to be 1. Now this is going to be pretty straightforward to solve, and most of you in an Algebra 2 level should be able to work with this and find this right away. Now, I need two factors of -4 whose sum is 3. Now when you're writing this out, one of the things I want you to make sure that you do is keep the equals 0 part. If you drop that, that's bad math, and your teacher's going to yell at you, and if they don't, they should, because you just took an equation and you want to make sure that you continue to write an equation. Now we've got x squared plus 3x minus 4 equals 0, so that's going to factor into, I know a lot of people use guess and test, they'll put the two x's there and you'll have plus 4 and then minus 1. Those are going to be your two factors of -4 that have a sum of 3. Now, the next step is another critical piece. Make sure each one of these, you're going to take each factor and you're going to set each one equal to 0. So you have x plus 4 equals 0. And that's how I want you guys to write it, just like that. Solving this, very straightforward. If you subtract 4 from both sides, you'll get x equals -4. So that is one of my zeros. The other 0, I'll take my other factor, x minus 1, and I'll set that one equal to 0. And then solving, I get x equals 1. And that's all there is to it. It's really that straightforward. It's really that simple. All right, so don't overcomplicate it, but I do want you to make sure that you keep this equals 0 piece all throughout each one of the pieces, just like it's modeled here. If you don't include that equals 0 piece, or you try and skip some of these steps, I'm going to ding you on that and take off a point, and your teacher probably will too. All right, so that's one quick example. Now you can verify this using your graphing calculator. First thing you want to do is type in the quadratic into your y1. Make sure there's nothing else in your calculator at all. When you graph it, now for this we use the Zoom 6, the standard viewing window from -10 to 10. And then the second thing I did is I just looked at my table, since both of these were integers. And if I look in my table, you'll notice right here at x equals -4, and then again here at x equals 1, both of those had a value of 0. So they confirm what I got over on when I did this algebraically. So that's one other piece you want to do, is look in your table of values when you get integer values to do that. There's several other ways to do that. So for more on that, see the videos on finding zeros of quadratics using your graphing calculator. Now we're going to take a look at another example here. So let's take a look at example number 2, 5x squared equals 125. Now this might not be the most efficient technique, but right now we're solving it by graphing. So what we want to do is go ahead and solve this by setting it equal to 0. So we've got to move everything over first. So we have 5x squared minus 125 equals 0. Now, again, I always want to check for my greatest common factor, and in fact, 5 goes into both of these terms. So I have x squared minus 25 equals 0. Now, don't forget the 5 out in front. Make sure you have that. When you factor it, you should recognize this to be x plus 5 and x minus 5. Again, keeping the equals 0 there. Now, the 5 that's out in the front, we're just going to ignore that now, because we're just going to deal with each factor. X plus 5 equals 0. So when I solve that, I'll get x equals -5. And then when I set x minus 5 equal to 0, I get x equals +5. So those are my two zeros for this function. Now again, you could verify this using your graphing calculator by first plugging your function into y1. And then when you hit zoom 6, you zoom standard, notice right here, and you can see it's highlighted in green, are two spots where our function crosses the x-intercept. So visually we're seeing, yep, we have two different zeros, one right here, where roots are x-intercept solutions. And again, that's confirmed when I look right here in my table of values, and then down over here. Both of those values, 5 and -5, are what we came up with when we solved our equation algebraically. So that's one other example for you, and we have one more example to do, solving ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 when a is not equal to 1. Alright, now for example number 3 here, we've got 3x squared plus 10x minus 8 equals 0. A lot of different ways you could solve this one as well. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the technique AC equals B. So, or AC. When we find that product, AC, when we multiply 3 and -8 together, we'll get -24. Now I want them to have a sum of positive 10. So I need two factors of -24 whose sum is 10. So if I do 1 and 24, whether that's positive or negative, it's not going to matter because that's not going to get me close to positive 10. So if I use 2 and 12, well, I can come up with some combination of those two to get positive 10, and the one that I want to be negative is going to be -2. So that's how I'm going to split this up this way. This 10x term right here, I'm going to make that these two terms instead. So that's going to end up looking like this. I'm going to have 3x squared, and I can write them in any order, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to write the -2 first, and then x plus 12x minus 8, again keeping the equals 0. Now I'm going to use factor by grouping then as I go through this piece right here. The first two terms I'm going to group together, and then the, oops, forgot the x, and then these two terms I'm going to go ahead and group together. Now out of the first two I can factor out an x. So I'll have just 3x minus 2 left. In the second group, 12x minus 8, I can factor out a 4, in which case I'll have 3x minus 2. Again, don't forget that equals 0 on the end. So what I'm going to do is take the 3x minus 2, because that's the same in both pieces. I'm going to write that one first, and then I'm going to have my other part is going to be the x, and then plus 4. So again, still keeping everything set equal to 0. So now that I've got my two factors all set, I can just simply set each one equal to 0. 3x minus 2 equals 0, and then x plus 4 equals 0. This one will be easier to solve first. I'll just end up with x equals -4. That's one of my zeros. And then my other one, I'll get 3x equals 2. And then when I divide both sides by 3, I get x equals 2/3. So these are my two zeros for this function. Now again, there's several different ways you can verify this on your graphing calculator, but I'll let you go ahead and do that on your own because by now you're an expert, and if not, you can go ahead and look at the video on finding zeros of quadratics using your graphing calculator. Alright, that's it for this section. I hope you guys found this useful, and you are all set and good to go and can now solve quadratic equations by using the factoring techniques. Alright, that's it. Have a great day. Peace.